video, we'll be talking about hope. How do we find hope? How do we connect with hope during a time when many of us are feeling some hopelessness, a disconnect from hope? I think it makes a lot of sense right now to be feeling that way. In the United States recently, there was the overturning of Roe v. Wade, abortion rights access. There's also a Supreme Court decision around revoking indigenous sovereignty. I don't remember the exact name of the case, but I do remember that was at stake. I'll include a link below if you want to learn more about that one. But yeah, there's a great deal of inflation. There's the ongoing COVID pandemic, which doesn't seem like people are taking seriously at an institutional level. There's the rising threat of fascism in many places, and then there's climate change. There's a great deal of things, in other words, that are causing us to feel the stress and maybe to disconnect from hope, because it feels like the world's problems are so big, and what can we really do about it, right? So this is a video about how to connect with hope. And it's only one way, it's not the only way. But I thought this would be a good time to make a video about hope, as a fair number of my clients, this is stuff we've been talking about, is hope. So it makes sense to make a video about it. So I've broken this up into a few different steps, as I tend to do. So our first step in connecting with hope is connection with yourself and with your existing support system. So I guess first we can talk about connecting with yourself. The first thing you'll want to do if you're feeling hopelessness is to acknowledge those feelings, is to feel the full weight of that hopelessness, to acknowledge, this is how hopelessness is feeling in my body. This is how it's affecting my day-to-day life. This is how it's affecting my relationships. Just to acknowledge it, because we can't really deal with the problem until we know what we're dealing with. So to acknowledge the full weight of your hopelessness is an important first part in connecting with hope. But also in that process, something else that you can do is to take time to disengage from those feelings. I think that's okay to say. I think this is something we'll naturally, probably most of us will be doing anyway. Watching TV, watching movies, listening to music, going out with our friends, whatever the different ways we have of disconnecting from all of the big feelings we're having, and having a little bit of distraction, a little bit of enjoyment, that's okay. So making time to acknowledge all of your feelings, making time to spend away from those big feelings, and in particular, making time to connect with your body through movement, through, just like all of the stress in your body, like letting it flow as you move around, either through exercise or through dance or through play. So yeah, connecting with self. And next we'll talk about connecting with your existing support system, because hope is not something we can build in isolation. Hope is something that we can only get through connection. So connecting with your existing support system, what that can look like is people who can understand the true weight of the hopelessness you're feeling. So that comes up in two levels. One is people who can see the validity of the things that are stressing you out. So If, like me, if you're trans, someone who at least has a passing familiarity with the stress and the danger of being trans right now. But that's just one example. Connecting with people who can see the difficulties of your current experience, and also connecting with people who can emotionally connect with you in that difficult experience. Because there may be some other people who are experiencing the same difficulty that you're experiencing, but they may not be able to support you in that because all they can do is run away from those feelings. And that's not going to feel very supportive if you're turning to those people for support. I think it makes sense why people would be called to run away from those feelings and to not want to acknowledge their hopelessness, as we just talked about, connecting with yourself. But yeah, I think when you're connecting with people for support, you want people who also can connect with their own self to a degree. Because then that'll give them the opportunity to emotionally connect with you and for you to emotionally connect with them. So connection and support goes both ways. So, being supported and offering support to people in similar sorts of situations, I think is an important part of building hope, building supportive relationships. So that's step 1. Step 2 is to spend some time researching social movements. For me, a lot of my difficulties with hopelessness, despair, are connected to feelings of powerlessness. And this powerlessness is connected to feelings of feeling very alone and like there's not much I can do about all of the big things in the world that are stressing me out. So the beauty of researching social movements is to see people just like me, just like you, who have been in similar situations and who have fought really hard to change things and been successful. I think it's really important to see and to have stories of people who have overcome despair and have connected and have fought for their rights in spite of everything. Because, it can feel like the world is ending right now. It can feel like there's so much and it just weighs on you. But other people have felt that way too. And you're not alone. And the people who have felt that way have fought back and have shown that another way other than despair is possible. Researching social movements shows us the way that people have already connected with hope in the past. And I think as you're researching social movements, what you'll want to do is to see the full arc, the full story of that social movement. So, maybe a good place to start would be with a speech or with learning about the life of a particular, person who you might have heard about. But to see that they're embedded in relationships, they are embedded in a broader movement, and that movement has things and people and relationships that came before it, that they learned from, and that they were supported by, and that they had their own disagreements, that they had differences, and that there was a variety of strategies, a variety of approaches, a variety of different goals that people had to work out. To see all of that, to see the different things that they responded, to see the repression, the different responses, and over the years down the line, what are some things that came out of that? What are some things that came out of that? And it's not always going to be all positive. I think having a nuanced perspective doesn't preclude hope, meaning that, we can appreciate the full complexity and still choose to feel hope as we're connecting with revolutionary history and revolutionary social movements. So, learning about this history, choosing to connect with the hope that is present in this history. And in terms of picking a social movement or a time or place in history, I suspect you may have something you may have heard about loosely out there somewhere, that you maybe never followed up on, or that you maybe could learn more about. Maybe something you heard in school, maybe something you've seen in a movie, something people have talked about in your community, or like sort of like a story that you've like loosely heard of, but you don't know any of the details. Start there. Start somewhere where you know and are interested to learn more. And maybe after that, you can branch out and learn about what is that connected to, and who else has done stuff like that. But yeah, really to start with what makes the most sense to you to start with in terms of learning the history of social movements. What do you want to learn about? And the other thing I'll say with this process of learning about social movements, don't be afraid to take your time. You don't gain anything by rushing. You're not going to learn all of this history in a day. And even if you could, emotionally, it's not going to connect. If you just gobble up all this information, it needs time to sink in. So, this is less of like a sequential, like linear series of steps, and more of like just things you can be doing. So as you're connecting with yourself, as you're connecting with your support system, also at that same time to you researching social movements, and maybe even be talking about it. To talk about what you're learning with the people you're in relationships with, and just spend time thinking about like, what was that like for them, and like, what are some of the things that they struggled with. So yeah, take your time. The world will still be the way that it is, whether or not you are actively worrying about it. The world will still be there more or less the same if you take some time to research social movements, connect with yourself, connect with your support system. So take the time to do it. Step 3 is to connect with current social movements. I trust maybe you can see how that would make sense, is to connect from researching the history to connecting with the current movement, is to see the context of where the current movement, the current moment is coming from by researching that history, and also to have learned a little bit from it, and then to see what is the stuff that people are doing now. As Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers would say, look for the helpers. You'll always find people who are helping. I really believe that. I really believe that there always are a group of people who are fighting for most anything you could think of, different social issues, different things that they're passionate about, that whatever it is that you're feeling connected with, whatever it is that you want to fight about too, there's probably people who are already doing that. Maybe they're not doing it the same way you would. Maybe you have some disagreements with them. That's okay. I would say before thinking about starting something new, and this is a trap I have admittedly fallen into a couple of times in my own process, before thinking about starting something new, connect with what already exists. Because that's how you build relationships. That's how you learn in practice, what does this stuff look like? And that's how you'll connect with hope, is to really get the sense by being in relationships, by envisioning how things can be different with other people who are also feeling some amount of hope, that change is possible, and hey, you're doing it. So I would say these steps don't all have to be in order, but definitely spend some time with step 1, connection with yourself and with your existing support systems. And with step 2, researching social movements before moving into step 3, because if you connect with current social movements before acknowledging the weight of your hopelessness, you may be acting from a place of reactivity, and it'll be very difficult to sustain that involvement. So do spend some time getting support, connecting with yourself, and on just learning before jumping in. You'll feel much more ready. Because again, there's no rush. These movements will be here. I'm gonna throw up a link somewhere because I know, like, I mentioned Roe v. Wade, and I know that's been one that's been on people's minds a lot. I'm gonna throw up a link somewhere about that too. A talk I mentioned recently from experienced movement organizers who have been organizing around abortion for many years, who have anticipated this moment and have been making plans, and they are filled with resolve. And when I connected with watching this video, I felt some hope in knowing the work that they're doing. So I want to share this video too. I'll throw it up here on the side, and it'll also be in the description. And when you're connecting with current social movements, just like when I talked about what you want to research, start with what you feel most connected to, what you feel most passionate about, rather than, what you feel like you should be doing or people who you feel like you should be working with. What do you most want to get involved with? What feels most sustainable to you? Do that, because we need helpers everywhere. So now, just to wrap up, connecting with hope in a time of hopelessness, really stay connected with yourself. Always return to that self-relationship of, like, how are you doing? How is that impacting your life? And then connect with your support system, people who will understand you. And then also connect with wider movements as well. Something which I maybe will make a separate video about is this idea of the self. How, we could think of the self as one person, or the self as more of like an interconnected web of community relationships. And when I say stay connected with the self, what I mean is to stay connected with both your own individual self and the wider web of relationships that you're a part of. So it's that connection to those wider relationships that I really feel like that's where hope can be found. So if you're feeling called to, why don't you share, if you're interested, like what social movement you might be interested in researching or connecting with in the comments section, or anything else that's helping you to connect with hope right now. And if you've liked this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and I also have a Patreon if you'd like to support me in making more videos. I would very much appreciate that. Thanks.